The sprawling Gilded Age estate proved too immense to preserve. Anna Dean Farm. Picture it now. Perched atop a rise is a residence that resembles a compact metropolis. Towering spires gleam, marble gleams, fountains sparkle. Known as Anodyne Farm, this property stretches so expansively that saving it borders on the unattainable. Stunning? Absolutely. Yet lurking beneath the splendor are mounting expenses, stacking up like a blizzard. Deserted corridors, chilled conduits, hush where vitality once buzzed. Its proprietor envisioned eternal legacy, only to inherit a snare. Each level drains funds, every passageway accrues obligations. Then arises the dilemma everyone dreaded confronting. The property's value eclipses the aspiration. Urban sprawl encroaches from every direction, and the majestic edifice starts to vanish, not through flames or conflict, but via gradual, subdued deconstruction. Who applied the halt? At what point did reversal become unfeasible? Why did this colossus prove too enormous to endure? And might there yet be a path to restore its soul? The entrance gates remain, imposing wrought iron, intricately designed to evoke the grandeur that once lay within. Today, they enclose emptiness. No roadway, no palace, no servants bearing torches amid downpours, just meadows, breezes, and the resonance of countless chambers. Those portals to Anodyne Farm swing wide, for there's no treasure left to protect. Yet venture past them, allow your gaze to absorb the barren incline, and the terrain starts to whisper. Vestiges of foundations, a gentle curve marking the site of a former mirror pond that captured the heavens. Masonry stairs ascending to oblivion. And with careful observation, attuned to the clues, one can outline the layout of one of the Midwest's grandest personal domains. A dwelling so immense it powered itself via a dedicated generating station, its own filtration systems, its own agricultural operations, equestrian facilities, conservatories, and a hamlet for employees. A realm encompassing about 30 structures over nearly 1,000 acres. The central abode boasted over 60 chambers with monthly service fees that could devour a laborer's annual wages. Anodyne Farm transcended mere residency. It formed a constructed habitat, a self-sufficient realm, atop a ridge beyond Barberton, Ohio, in the dawn of the 20th century. Featuring marble, mahogany, precisely hewn rock, radiant heating, illumination by electricity, and interior sanitation, at a time when vast swaths of the U.S. relied on outhouses. By objective standards, it was remarkable. In reality, though, it was untenable. The figures reveal the reality. Records vary. Still, sustaining Anodyne Farm allegedly devoured tens of thousands of dollars monthly, during an era when typical wages hovered under $500 annually. The heating systems devoured coal in massive quantities. The landscapes required an army of horticulturists. The building's materials craved perpetual maintenance: coatings, fillers, coverings, glasswork. Winters brought burst lines. Tempests demanded fixes. Every cycle brought fresh bills. Unlike the continent's storied chateaus, bolstered by ages of nobility and generational wealth, Anodyne Farm lacked noble lineage, no venerable accounts of tributes and holdings. It rested on a single individual, a solitary wealth, a lone ambition. When that ambition faltered, when income dipped, when outlays persisted, when the realm outside the railings evolved, the estate had no safety net. The allure of its elegant splendor evokes fond memories. Ensembles, bubbly toasts, flowing satin amid polished floors, formal discussions on commerce and culture under shimmering fixtures. Some of that materialized, if only fleetingly. Yet amid the opulence and design, a harsher reality emerged. The residence was overly expansive, prohibitively expensive, overly bold for the financial landscape encircling it. The core issue at Anodyne Farm wasn't artistic, but practical. How does one sustain a site whose upkeep exceeds a typical lifetime's earnings? How does one warm and crew a 60-room behemoth when the nearby community struggles for basics? How does one safeguard elegance once it morphs into a liability? The response, in that era, was simple. You couldn't. Not in that location, not at that time, not amid the 1920s, not in Ohio through the Great Depression, not in a society hurtling ahead quicker than any estate could match. Anodyne Farm didn't perish in blaze or deluge. It dissolved beneath a subtler, unyielding force, calculation. The equations ceased to align. Return to the origins, to the moment when impossibility seemed distant, when the vision was emerging from the soil, when a solitary figure surveyed a vacant embankment and resolved to erect a structure destined for perpetuity. Eternity feels more graspable when you're wielding a spark, not figuratively, a literal one, the sort struck on a striker, the variety that ignites vividly, sustains evenly, and bends flame to mortal command. During the 1890s, matches permeated daily life. They ignited cook fires, illuminants, smokes, and ovens. These little items were tiny, affordable, and utterly essential, and if you could manufacture them superior to competitors, churning out millions at a time, you could transform basic phosphorus and timber into a much greater treasure. Cash. Ohio Columbus Barber grasped this idea sharply. Born in 1841, he was an entrepreneur, geared toward optimization and expansion. He hadn't created the matchstick itself. Instead, he revolutionized its production. By the 1880s, his diamond match company had risen to become the globe's top producer, generating billions each year. On paper, the process seemed straightforward. Slice the wood, apply the chemicals, package them up, and distribute. In truth, though, it required factories, machinery, skilled labor, and a vast network for delivery spanning the nation. Barber constructed the entire operation from start to finish. Wealth poured in soon after. Now the challenge lay in handling that wealth. Plenty of people might have settled for riches alone. Barber sought something lasting. He set out to create a community from the ground up, not just fund an existing one, but to blueprint it, craft it, and bring it to fruition. Much like he'd orchestrated his manufacturing plants. In 1891, he established Barberton, Ohio, roughly 35 miles south of Cleveland. His vision was refined. Attract businesses to the area, draw employees to those businesses, and let affluence ripple outward from the synergy. Match production would form the core, with additional industries following suit. Barber would provide employment, homes, and essential services. The settlement would flourish. Residents' households would gain security, and Barber himself would forge a heritage outlasting any single matchstick's flame. The strategy succeeded. Barberton boomed swiftly. Fresh facilities sprang up. Railroad connections linked it to Cleveland and Akron. Lake Anna, an artificial lake, provided fresh water and a communal park. Avenues bustled with laborers and kids. Stores emerged. Educational buildings took shape. In just 10 years, barren fields had morphed into a well-oiled industrial hub. Publications celebrated the match magnate, praising his fulfillment of promises. Yet factories and paychecks only went so far. Communities crave more than income. They require inspiration and elegance. They demand an emblem declaring, "This spot counts, this spot endures." Barber decided to erect such a landmark atop a prominence. The location faced westward across Barberton, elevated terrain, offering a sweeping panorama of the expanse, distant enough from the factories to avoid the grime, yet near enough to observe his venture's outcomes. The property would span widely and purposefully, merging the sophistication of old-world rural estates with the productivity of an active agricultural operation. It would feature cultivated plots, animals, and conservatories. The setup would incorporate cutting-edge features, electrical illumination, radiant heating, and telecommunication wires, and it would bear a title with deep personal resonance, a soft touch amid the steel and drive. He named it Anna Dean Farm, in tribute to his spouse. Anna Dean Barber, by all reports, was pragmatic and community-focused, deeply involved in local initiatives, philanthropy, and the ongoing efforts to mold a burgeoning locale. She pursued no airs or superficial prestige. Rather, she stood as an equal in Barber's grand design, level-headed regarding the duties tied to fortune. The estate would celebrate her, certainly, while also making a statement. Achievement didn't have to sever ties with the soil. Advanced methods and farming expertise could coexist harmoniously. Industrial progress and aesthetic appeal weren't at odds. Initial sketches embodied this outlook in bricks and conduits. A central dwelling with welcoming halls for visitors and administrative spaces for oversight. A self-contained generator facility to power not just the residents, but the outbuildings, conservatories, equestrian quarters, and repair shops. A grinder for processing cereals, warm enclosures to shelter animals, storage vaults to keep provisions cool in the heat, all linked seamlessly, all optimized, every element contributing to a cohesive whole, the spending aligned with the scope. Precise costs from the design phase are tough to nail down, but observers at the time pegged the overall expense at hundreds of thousands of dollars, worth tens of millions in modern terms. Barber had the means to cover it. His match business was still surging. The community was prospering. The moment seemed ideal. Building commenced toward the end of the 1890s. Rock was extracted from quarries. Bases were laid. Designers polished the facades. Teams showed up equipped with implements and lumber. And there, on that Ohio rise, an audacious concept started solidifying into reality. One concern that few voiced too insistently, and maybe couldn't amid the wave of enthusiasm, was if erecting such an expansive ideal might yield something too grand to maintain. That resolution would emerge in due time. Meanwhile, the labor pressed forward. The project advanced and transformed. What started as blueprints for a respectable rural retreat, admirable, sure, but grounded, ballooned gradually into an altogether different scale. With every choice, every revised schematic, every consultation with designers and specialists, Barber's ambition intensified. The primary structure ballooned from a cozy manor to an expansive shadow. Outlying structures proliferated. Utilities wove into a complex lattice. By the dawn of the 1900s, Anna Dean Farm had evolved from a mere home into a modest realm. The title itself sparked debate. This wasn't some opulent Barber property or a lavish Gilded Age retreat atop the hill. It felt intimate. Anna Dean Farm. Naming a farm after a woman evoked images of open fields and close-knit family. Not just ostentatious flair. That subtlety was no accident. Barber aimed for practicality alongside spectacle, a productive site that showcased how contemporary riches could advance farming, blending innovation with heritage to yield something both practical and elegant. Initial blueprints highlighted this fusion. Indeed, the central residence would boast magnificence, 3 levels of sturdy stone and brick, featuring spaces for social events, musical evenings, overnight visitors, and artistic displays. Yet it would also incorporate practical areas like administrative offices and operational spaces for overseeing an actual agricultural operation. Sketches positioned a grand dance hall next to a commercial workspace. A glass-enclosed atrium for exotic flora, alongside a wire room linked to Barber's manufacturing empire. Outside the residence, ambitions expanded further. A dedicated power facility would form the core of the property's vital infrastructure, supplying electricity, not just for illumination, but also for irrigation systems, climate control, and equipment. Underground steam lines from boilers would distribute warmth throughout all structures. A towering reservoir would ensure consistent hydraulic force. Drainage channels and buried tiles would prevent flooding in the lower areas. Communication cables would connect the primary dwelling to outbuildings like horse barns, plant nurseries, and repair shops. Those nurseries were no mere ornaments. Expansive glazed enclosures kept warm around the clock, coaxing blooms and produce to thrive despite Ohio's harsh cold. The equestrian facilities would accommodate scores of steeds, serving not only for travel, but also for selective breeding and exhibitions that highlighted quality livestock and meticulous upkeep. Outbuildings would shelter herds of cows, swine, and fowl. Storage towers would store harvested crops. Maintenance sheds would manage fixes and upkeep. Quarters for employees would position experienced laborers near the ceaseless tasks. The budget reflected such vastness. Preliminary figures pegged the overall expense at $300,000 to $500,000. Extraordinary figures back then. To put it in perspective, a solid suburban home in Barberton could run around $2,000. An average mill hand might earn about $500 annually. Barber was willing to invest the rough yearly pay of 1,000 laborers into one cohesive domain. He had the means. The Diamond Match Company kept generating revenue. Barberton kept expanding. And Barber envisioned the broader impact of this venture, not just for him and Anna, but for the community downhill. Anna Dean Farm would serve as a functional emblem of prosperity, illustrating the fruits of manufacturing and sketching a blueprint for regional progress. It would host events, attract sightseers, provide jobs to locals, and source materials from nearby vendors. It would blend secluded living with communal motivation. That vision materialized during the initial building phases. Rock was extracted and laid in place. The energy station took shape. Base supports for the primary building anchored firmly into the terrain. The location buzzed each day with bricklayers, woodworkers, wiring experts, and pipe fitters. The hillside pulsed with coordinated labor. Barber frequently toured the site, scrutinizing elements and refining plans. His heritage was materializing in solid forms: barriers, conduits, and illumination. Anna Dean Farm sought to embody attentiveness to the soil, to the settlement, to what lay ahead. It strove to affirm that an Ohio-based match producer could craft a domain as refined as an aristocratic European retreat and as forward-thinking as top-tier U.S. advancements, built to last through the strength of masonry, metal, and resolve. Yet transformation was underway. From aspiration to colossal endeavor, from concept to burden, ongoing costs escalated even before the final beams were installed. Ambitions kept growing. What began as a rural retreat with active farming had evolved into something grander, more complex, and vastly pricier than initially conceived. During those optimistic construction periods, however, amid the facility's steady operation, the residence's upward progress, and the expansive vista ahead, the concealed costs remained unseen. Invoices would come due in time. They invariably do. Invoices would come due in time. First emerged the mechanisms. Anna Dean Farm wasn't simply constructed. It was meticulously designed. Each lavish chamber, ornate railing, and ornate hearth relied on an invisible framework woven beneath surfaces and within partitions. Hydraulics, thermal distribution, power supply, waste removal, connectivity. Absent this concealed apparatus, the dwelling couldn't operate, and integrating it required a degree of engineering rigor rare in personal residences. Consider the energy facility first. It occupied a separate edifice, distant from the main structure but linked via subsurface channels. Within burned coal-powered furnaces, vapor-driven rotors, and current-producing dynamos. The setup generated ample voltage to brighten the great house, along with the distant plant houses, riding areas, tool rooms, and employee lodgings dotting the landscape. It operated non-stop. Fuel shipments arrived in bulk via dedicated tracks. Stokers tended the blazes, monitored instruments, and maintained fittings. Operations adhered to a schedule. Fires kindled pre-dawn to prepare warmth and baths as the home awakened. Capacity peaked during peak activity, dipped slightly after dark, but persisted without pause. The power distribution network alone qualified as a major undertaking. Threading wires demanded navigating solid stone and plaster walls. Installing fixtures spanned every chamber: switches, sockets, fuse panels, backups. As countless U.S. homes clung to gas lamps or tapers, Anodyne Farm shimmered under electric glow. Chandeliers, wall sconces, task lights, plus outdoor floods that illuminated the terraces come nightfall. Impressive, cutting-edge, yet demanding hefty upkeep. Water systems brought their share of hurdles. A lofty tank stored vast quantities pulled from wells and catchment basins, pressurized to serve the whole estate. Extra circuits handled hot water. The central plant's boilers warmed it, piping the heated flow via insulated conduits to bathrooms, kitchens, and laundries. Icy lines extended to barns and greenhouses. Sewage lines sloped gently downhill, steering clear of the clean supply. The setup required precision. Flawless execution hinged on skilled know-how, durable components, and vigilant monitoring. For heating, the setup was the most ambitious. Steam delivery ensured reliable, adjustable comfort, provided the infrastructure endured. Buried pipes conveyed vapor from the facility to radiators throughout the mansion and auxiliary structures. Insulation had to be spot on, slopes precise, upkeep rigorous. Seeps wasted fuel. Iced sections halted flow. Fixes involved digging furrows, replacing segments, refilling soil. Ohio's harsh winters exposed any flaws. Warmth wasn't a luxury here. Layout sketches resembled blueprints for a town. The primary residence sat at the core, with branches extending outward. Power stations southward, conservatories eastward, horse barns westward, agricultural sheds placed strategically. Diagrams sketched power lines, steam paths, aqueducts, and sewers, all connected, all reliant on one another. Operating this network required a workforce. Beyond kitchen help and domestics, it called for technicians, wiremen, pipe fitters, and stoker teams. Dawn broke the routine. By 5 a.m., stokers ignited the furnaces. Water lines got inspected, panels scanned, flues cleared, and greenhouses irrigated. Barns cleaned, livestock nourished. Indoor crew prepped meals, tidied spaces, handled shipments. Come mid-morning, the grounds pulsed like a compact metropolis, ticking to a rhythm. During high season, with the barbers hosting and socializing, upwards of 30 staff might bustle about: chefs, waitstaff, valets, cleaners, gardeners, grooms, repair squads. Duties followed rosters, schedules, protocols, overseeing it all. Lead engineer, top landscaper, estate steward. Layers of command, synchronization, compensation. Expenses piled up fast. Coal hauls, salaries, fixes, spare bits, coverage, levies, routine bills that would astonish a typical family. Anodyne Farm wasn't just a fortune to erect. Sustaining its pulse cost a king's ransom. Daily it craved fuel, manpower, vigilance, and funds. But when the framework functioned, steam sighing up shafts, lights blazing steady, taps gushing steaming from stone basins, the impact stunned. The estate seemed alive, cozy, inviting, forward-thinking beyond most estates. It evoked the dawn of tomorrow. No one voiced the plain query. Quote 1. Furnaces hungered for coal. Conduits begged maintenance. Hands sought wages. The very mechanisms enabling Anodyne Farm rendered it voracious, and they never ceased. They kept churning without pause. Still, not every space shared the same status. Strolling Anodyne Farm in its prime, you'd cross between parallel realms, separated sometimes by mere portals or steps. Guest areas, zones for reception and show, captured the Gilded Age's splendor. Vaulted ceilings, elaborate moldings, Italian-carved mantels, polished timber planks gleaming like glass, soaring panes capturing the dale as vivid canvases. Bands performed here. Formal attire clinked with bubbly. Here, dealmakers instantly knew O.C. Barber had made his mark. The music hall revolved around a majestic piano, allegedly a Steinway, per conflicting logs, angled for optimal sound. The study amassed fine-bound books encircling plush seats for study or subdued chats. The banquet hall accommodated over 20 under a massive fixture, requiring ladders for dusting. Indeed, a grand hall for waltzes and soirees that transformed a home into a magnet. Veer aside, descend back passages, pass a subtle entry, and the atmosphere shifted. The undercroft buzzed audibly. The structure's innards murmured, rushing fluids, vapor sighs. The generator's electric pulse surging above. This level housed the guts behind the grace. Furnace vaults, engine rooms, stockpiles of fuel and reserves, rough brick over stone, raw cement underfoot, not lustrous wood. Utility trumped aesthetics at every corner. The washrooms claimed a generous wing. Industrial-grade sinks lined the space, alongside drying frames and ironing machines. Maintaining outfits for a residence of this magnitude demanded constant effort, dedicated implements, and expertise, plus an unending supply of steaming water. The kitchen extended across multiple chambers, featuring preparation surfaces, cooking stations, chilled storage areas, ample cupboards, and heavy-duty appliances throughout. Stoves capable of handling whole cuts of beef, plus baking chambers that churned out batch after batch of bread. Refrigerators drew from the property's dedicated ice-making facility. A dedicated lift connected the various levels, though never for company. This was a plain functional carrier, hauling goods, fabrics, logs, or any cumbersome items that stairs couldn't manage. Tucked away within partitions, the passage remained invisible to outsiders, crucial for smooth functioning. Servants used it non-stop, delivering whatever the grander areas needed while upholding the seamless facade. Such opposition was by design. Design embodied rules. The display spaces served to dazzle, soothe, and showcase refinement alongside riches. The utility areas underpinned it all, remaining hidden, operating flawlessly. Upstairs offered artistry, melodies, sunlight streaming via tall panes. Downstairs hummed with straps of hide-powering devices, vapor controls needing regular tweaks, and fuel holds refilled daily. The conservatory network highlighted this split plainly. Access the entrance for show, and you'd enter a lush haven. Rare plants from distant lands, groomed walkways, moist heat amid the cold season, blooms like orchids and ferns climbing the panes. The atmosphere carried scents of soil and flowers, a highlight that sparked talks and demonstrated Barber's skill at conjuring warmth at will. Yet the spectacle relied on unseen toil. Seedling tables, soil-mixing zones, implement holders, warming pipes. Regular workers tended daily, irrigating, trimming, monitoring gauges, combating ailments, swapping out the weak. The allure on view stayed fresh through ongoing oversight, control, assessment, and significant expense. The horse barns echoed this pattern. Front-facing zones shone with buffed fixtures, sculpted wood, enclosures crafted from top materials. Guests marveled at pedigrees, chatted about lineage, lauded the upkeep. But beyond the tidy rows lay the truth. Grain depots, waste management, medical stations, gear and saddle storage. Splendor needed foundations. Foundations needed funds and workers. This split layout shaped the entire estate. All those graceful public displays depended on concealed labors. Every hanging light required bulb swaps, crystal polishing, circuit inspections. Every stone surface called for thorough cleaning. Every heating unit needed vigilance. Every mechanism demanded upkeep. From the exterior, the manor showed one side, poised, seamless, timeless. Flip the view, and another emerged, an industrial hub, insistent, voracious for resources. Lovely from select perspectives, harshly efficient from the rest. Each aspect held validity, each was vital, and each drained funds in perpetual flow. Down levels, through exits, toward paychecks, fuel, fixes, levies. The mechanisms ignored what they powered. They just operated, and the expenses persisted, and the invoices accumulated. Yet Barber trusted the estate could offset them. This wasn't some noble's vanity display, with ornamental livestock lounging on scenic fields. Anodyne Farm aimed to generate output, run with methodical oversight, tracked meticulously, designed to generate income amid its charm. Barber treated farming like his ventures, via methods, figures, and faith that optimization yields gains from efforts. The livestock weren't just holdings, they were investments. Figures in accounts meant, in theory, to even out. The piggery illustrated this mindset clearly. Positioned downslope from the main dwelling, distant enough to avoid gripes, near enough for supervision. It housed scores of swine in setups that, for the era's start, stood out as compassionate and advanced. Structures allowed ventilation. Surfaces stayed sanitary. Arrangements curbed sickness. No packing them in. Space for activity. Yard access in fair weather. Solid cover in storms. Well-being had aims past mercy. Fit hogs bulked up quicker, produced superior cuts, fetched higher rates. Employees recorded rations exactly, intake per group, quantities, frequency. Growth logs followed progress. Sickness signs triggered prompt quarantine, care, watchfulness. Swine fed the grounds, with extras going to nearby buyers when possible. The intent was straightforward. Boost production, cut waste, transform feed and toil into earnings. Metrics received close attention. Per head feed expenses against growth, slaughter outputs. Sale rates, partial surviving logs reveal a committed enterprise. This wasn't farming for show, it was farming for gain. Fowl operations mirrored the approach. Hens and waterfowl resided in custom coops with reliable hydration and scheduled meals. The water features for ducks functioned as utilities, not ornaments. Flowing clean input, draining runoff, keeping cycles hygienic. Workers collected eggs each day, counted hauls, noted consistent layers versus underperformers. Laggards got removed. Dependable egg producers were retained for reproduction purposes. Each week, hundreds of eggs were collected from the nests. A portion headed directly to the mansion's kitchen for use. The rest supplied local stores and eateries in Barberton. The earnings remained small but real. Each dozen sold offset a bit of the ongoing expenses required to sustain the property. The stables housed the estate's priciest livestock. Equines suited for riding, pulling carriages, or competing in exhibitions. Barber invested in superior pedigrees, animals capable of earning awards and generating fees for breeding services, ensuring daily brushing, consistent workouts, top-quality fodder and oats, and prompt medical care. No detail escaped oversight, though such elite maintenance demanded steep prices, frequent farrier calls, custom nutrition, instruction sessions, competition registrations, and wages for expert handlers to execute tasks flawlessly. These steeds captivated guests and sparked lively discussions, yet they drained funds as well. Revenue from mating charges and sporadic sales trickled back, seldom matching the outflows. Livestock roamed the fields, yielding milk and meat in return. The dairy operation furnished fresh milk, cream, and butter for the household. Excess products reached town purchasers. Steers raised for slaughter were processed right there, or dispatched via commercial routes. All aspects, feed costs, vet fees, production volumes, and revenue, were meticulously recorded. Gradually, these records painted an honest portrait of the true expense involved in operating a farm of this caliber. The account books, entry by entry, exposed the shortfall plainly. Indeed, the operation generated eggs, pork, dairy, beef, and breeding income, but far short of breaking even. In a strong season, farm profits might offset just a portion of the routine monthly bills, say, 1/10 or optimistically 1/5 at most. The bulk still hinged on Barber's manufacturing wealth. Thus, the farm remained compassionate, efficiently managed, and remarkably structured, a testament to how advanced techniques, backed by resources and expertise, could yield results. It never evolved into what Barber envisioned above all, an independent venture that proved its worth through solid gains. The creatures flourished, the processes functioned smoothly, the records stayed accurate, yet numbers refused to yield to ambition. This farm operated as an expense generator, cloaked in a commercial blueprint, attractive, efficient, and in the end propped up by external funds. The book spoke plainly. With neither flair nor leniency, they showed it could never sustain itself. It couldn't cover its own way. But, perhaps for a single evening, or a handful. Still, envision one flawless night. Forget the rest. Envision a warm summer evening, around 1910 or 1911. Anodyne Farm at its peak performance, all mechanisms harmonizing perfectly, every lamp aglow, lawns manicured to perfection, the primary residence bustling with visitors, associates from Cleveland's industries and Akron's notables, community figures from Barberton, kin and companions assembled to celebrate triumphs, melodies wafting through the panes, laughter mingling with the tinkle of fine glassware. An occasion that convinces you the investment pays off. The entryway itself, awed. Vehicles traversed the extended driveway, first horse-drawn, then the emerging motor cars that Barber increasingly preferred. Portals swung wide in greeting. Branches formed a verdant tunnel along the path. At last, the manor rose against the slope, illuminated inside and out. Each pane radiated like a spotlight in a dramatic unveiling. This transcended mere shelter. It proclaimed achievement. You've made it. Here's prosperity embodied. Within, the functional heart transformed into a display of elegance. Utility areas remained out of sight. Equipment hummed softly below stairs. Attendants glided unseen. Beverages refilled. Dishes whisked away. Flawlessness upheld without fanfare. On the upper level, reception areas gleamed. In the music chamber, a modest ensemble, fiddles, maybe a bass anchored by keyboard, performed hits and dances, sophisticated yet approachable, coaxing revelers to the parquet. The supper hall showcased the property's bounty as theater. Produce from the conservatories plated artfully. Swine from the pens refined by chefs turning rustic fare into gourmet. Dairy offerings right from the source. Imported vintages and rarities graced the table, true, but alongside evidence that Anodyne Farm nourished its own with splendor. The feast served not just to sat, but to illustrate prowess. The grand hall, let's call it the ballroom, presuming its scale matched the memories, teemed with twirlers. Surfaces buffed over days. The overhead fixture captured rays and flung them over smiles and finery. All ages swirled through structured routines requiring rhythm and rehearsal. Tunes built to crescendos. Spectators nodded in admiration. Refinement thriving amid Ohio's factories. Beyond the estate prolonged the enchantment. Torches lined routes through lush, shadowed plantings. The water feature mirrored the lunar sheen and the home's radiance, amplifying each. Cascades wove audio threads into the tableau. Jets, snaring illumination in flight. A visitor might venture outside for a breath. exchange soft remarks, and sense utter detachment from the factories and depots funding this idyll. The glasshouses shimmered, too. By dark, outlines of tropical fronds shadowed the panes. A slice of endless warmth amid Buckeye chill. Certain visitors no doubt strolled over to experience the steamy heat, inhale the scent of soil and flowers. Observe how ingenuity and wealth kept the cold at arm's length. Down beneath, the generating station maintained its steady pulse. By the horse barns, lanterns flickered as teams oversaw the operations. Rotors turned. Furnaces maintained their force. Vapor flowed via underground lines, ensuring spaces stayed cozy and faucets remained scalding, delivering ease to visitors oblivious to its origins. Scores of staff labored through the darkness. Performers, waitstaff, chefs, janitors, technicians, chauffeurs, each contributing a strand to the fabric of that single gathering. Ohio and Anna glided among the attendees, accepting compliments, fully inhabiting the roles they had crafted for themselves. Patrons, innovators, proof that commerce could acquire elegance. This residence, this evening, this instant. Here lay proof of success, the gamble, the expenditure. The ambition. Behold our creation. Behold our accomplishment. Behold it for that solitary occasion. Maybe it sufficed. Maybe the debts hushed. Maybe the numbers could be overlooked. Maybe splendor and collective joy served as their own reward. The melody persisted. The illumination shone brightly. The manor pulsed, vibrated, gleamed. This marked the zenith, the precise second when Anodyne Farm realized Ohio's vision. Invulnerable, eternal, flawless. Yet summits, for all their height, answer to the pull of earth. What ascends inevitably descends, and the drop, when it commenced, unfolded more gradually than anticipated, more silently, more subtly perceptible, yet equally unavoidable, equally fated. The fractures emerged well before anyone would acknowledge them. Not physical rifts. Those came afterward, with walls cracking in neglected chambers and ceilings beginning to drip. The initial harm was more insidious, monetary, structural. The sort of gradual decay that occurs via one invoice here, one fix there, one stretch of outflows exceeding inflows. It escapes notice initially. You spot it only upon recognizing the trend accumulating over months, even years, and that undoing it demands precisely what you lack: a smaller domain. Energy expenses spearheaded the decline. Coal rates fluctuated, with economic tides beyond Ohio's influence. In one season, a ton ran a particular price. The following, it could surge by 20%. The facility paid no heed. It devoured whatever fuel was essential to sustain illumination, heated water, and consistent warmth. During an average cold spell, the property devoured hundreds of tons. A gentle winter trimmed the expense. A severe one inflated it. The elements disregarded ledgers. Accurate forecasting proved elusive. Upkeep costs inched higher. The rooftop started seeping. No disaster, merely tiles wearing down from gales and elements. Mending such a covering wasn't a simple, hasty mend. It called for platforms, expert labor, bespoke supplies from vendors charging for affluent patrons. One area patched this season, others 2 years on. The bills mounted, thousands in costs just to bar the wet. Coverage fees traced the identical incline. To insurers, such an elaborate and pricey asset screamed peril. Flames could obliterate millions in value. Tempests, burglaries, lawsuits. Should a visitor tumble down steps, every threat bore a tariff. Rates escalated yearly. Foregoing protection was inconceivable. Covering it siphoned funds from alternative fixes and ventures. Machinery endured in situ, rotors in the station, required components, then full swaps. Furnaces demanded checks, refurbishments, regular reconstructions. Conduits rusted, wiring circuits malfunctioned. Impellers broke down. No mechanism endured indefinitely, and operating the grounds relentlessly, day in and day out, season upon season, invited failures. Certain periods saw standard seals and spigots. Other times saw a whole impeller unit in the dead of night after a rupture. Staffing couldn't shrink without operations crumbling. You couldn't release the specialists sustaining the station. You couldn't shed the landscapers and anticipate self-tending lawns. You couldn't slash the culinary team yet continue entertaining. Compensation was largely immovable, a substantial, recurring burden that persisted. Outside the wrought iron entrance, society evolved in manners that squeezed the grip tighter. Land levies in Ohio increased. Municipalities sought funds. Education required backing. Thoroughfares needed care. Spanning thousands of acres with scores of structures, Anodyne Farm offered an expansive assessment target. Valuators determined figures and issued demands. Ohio settled them, and annually the total swelled. Commercial outlets eased just where the property sought respite. Rates for poultry eggs, swine, and stud services stalled or dipped as expenses pressed ahead. The disparity expanded, not via one sharp rupture, but persistently, unyieldingly. The ledgers chronicled the tale. Expenditures surpassing income, month by month, year by year. Ohio's manufacturing assets could cover the shortfall. Diamond Match continued yielding solid gains, but further interests demanded liquidity. Additional endeavors craved funding. Barberton demanded sustained aid. The medical center, the academies, the framework sustaining the community. Ohio's resources were vast, not boundless. Anodyne Farm was turning into a financial burden, more than a valuable holding. To casual observers, the residents appeared immune to any strain. Illuminations continued to glow brightly. Warmth still permeated the hallways. The household team maintained their routines without fail. Visitors encountered the identical sophistication, the familiar luxury, the implication of endless resources. However, behind closed doors in financial records and hushed discussions with Barber and his economic counselors, a pressing concern emerged. For how much longer can we keep this up? Silence greeted the query. Not immediately, anyway. The property was simply too stunning. The vision it represented felt indispensable. Optimism lingered that circumstances would shift. Expenses might stabilize, revenue could climb, equilibrium would restore itself naturally. But it didn't. The numbers told an unmistakable story. Still, optimism holds sway, momentum carries forward, and nobody relishes uttering the harsh reality first, particularly when positive work persists. Barber remained deeply engaged in beneficial endeavors, tangible, impactful contributions that established enduring foundations, far surpassing any grand residence. As Anodyne Farm devoured funds at a pace it couldn't maintain, Barber's support for Barberton never wavered. The community he established kept reaping the rewards of his foresight, investments, and determination to elevate it beyond a mere factory outpost in Ohio. The hospital exemplified this. In 1913, Barber donated substantial land and funds to establish Barberton Citizens Hospital. Far from a minimal outpost or rudimentary facility, it was a state-of-the-art institution, featuring skilled personnel, operating rooms, and up-to-date technology. For a blue-collar locale, this proved revolutionary. Factory accident victims finally had a dedicated place for recovery. Mothers could give birth in secure conditions. Diseases received expert management. Countless lives were preserved, directly and quantifiably. The endowment ran into tens of thousands of dollars, if not beyond. Accounts vary, but the dedication was clear. In contrast to Anodyne Farm, which mainly catered to his relatives and visitors, the hospital welcomed all. Laborers, merchants, youngsters, whoever required medical aid. In these efforts, affluence fulfilled its noblest role, generating communal value, addressing urgent demands, constructing legacies that outlasted their creator. He backed educational institutions, bolstered religious organizations, contributed to essential services like roadways, drainage systems, and public structures. Each investment fortified Barberton further. Residents had ample cause for appreciation. Barber transcended the role of job provider. He acted as benefactor and champion. He delivered not merely employment but the foundations for a flourishing society. The sense of accomplishment was undoubtedly profound. This formed a substantial inheritance. Anodyne Farm dazzled onlookers. Barberton Citizens Hospital mended the afflicted. Classrooms shaped future leaders. Utilities and networks enabled everyday existence for multitudes. Should priorities clash between personal opulence and societal welfare, evidence points to Barber cherishing them equally while recognizing the latter's deeper significance. Yet this bred a bitter contradiction. The greater his outlays to Barberton, the tougher it grew to uphold Anodyne Farm. Each allocation to the hospital meant funds unavailable for roof tiles or window panes. Every school donation diverted cash from fuel supplies. These acts were essential, praiseworthy, morally sound, yet they tapped into the identical limited reserves intended to fuel both philanthropy and personal grandeur. The accounts from that era speak plainly. Farm yields remained limited and were declining. Income from local real estate held firm but fell short. Profits from manufacturing remained robust, yet were progressively allocated to communal priorities. Maintenance expenses at Anodyne Farm climbed year by year. The annual deficit, spanning what the property generated versus what it required, reached tens of thousands of dollars, drawn from Barber's broader holdings, the very reservoir supporting healthcare and education. The equation was unforgiving. Operating Anodyne Farm in full swing outpaced the expense of numerous key public initiatives. Utility bills for a single month might match a full-year educator's wage. Employee compensation surpassed certain municipal department allocations. Estate taxes alone could have resurfaced avenues, modernized plumbing, or tackled dozens of routine improvements. Barber wasn't oblivious. He recognized the disparity. But curtailing or forsaking Anodyne Farm would signal that the ideal couldn't overcome finances. It would acknowledge that the dwelling honoring his wife, designed for eternity, faced an endpoint. Thus, he forged ahead, settling obligations on both fronts, financing the hospital alongside the manor, aiding academia while nurturing the conservatories, donating to the municipality while preserving Anodyne Farm. He aimed to achieve it all, aware it was unattainable, banking on a reversal that might enable it. Contributions to Barberton persisted. Payments to bridge the farm's deficits continued. The divide kept expanding. Barber's benevolence was genuine. His impacts were profound. The hospital preserved existences. Academies molded cohorts. The settlement advanced, thanks to his willingness to commit. Still, each benevolence intensified the challenge of rescuing the residents. And the residents required ever more rescue from concerns that ought to have been irrelevant but weren't. Not catastrophes like blazes or deluges, nor those dramatic calamities one could attribute to destiny. Instead, the blows stemmed from the everyday grind. Bureaucratic, regulatory, and procedural hurdles that arrived via mail, stacked up on desks, required signatures and payments. Each incision minor, but collectively lethal. Property taxes hit initially with relentless official precision. Valuations arrived annually, and year after year they appeared to escalate through creative accounting. In Ohio, land was appraised based on its documented worth, and on documents, Anodyne Farm sprawled enormously, spanning thousands of acres, with scores of buildings, infrastructure, and crops valued at considerable sums. Evaluators toured the property, jotted observations, hunted for non-existent benchmarks, and assigned values that suited their spreadsheets, yet overwhelmed the owner, forced to foot the bill. The bills arrived next, thousands in dollars, inflexible, pay up or face liens, lawsuits, confiscation. Barber settled them. Yet every such payment diverted funds from glazing greenhouse glass, swapping out boiler pipes, or funding extra hours during peak times. A rigid expense that penalized splendor, curbed drive, and viewed worth as abstract while insisting on immediate full payment. Insurance rates followed a similar upward path, not due to any actual mishaps, but because the formulas dictated it. Experts reassessed rebuilding expenses and risks, concluded vulnerabilities had increased, and hiked the fees in response. Yet another substantial yearly obligation, unaffected by income, conditions, or events. Legal entanglements proliferated in subdued offices. An estate of this scale intersected various districts, borders, rights of way. Water access and land use changes. As Barberton expanded, every dossier demanded legal advice. That advice required compensation. Certain conflicts resolved for mere hundreds, others for thousands. A handful dragged on for years, draining resources steadily. The elements contributed their bureaucratic aftermath, too. Precipitation, exploited vulnerabilities. A loose slate here, faulty flashing there. No apocalypse, just gradual leaks that discolored ceilings, weakened timbers, and spotted walls. Attics drew in moisture at the edges. The framework endured for the moment. Exteriors deteriorated. Visitors observed. Employees recorded it. Fixes were prioritized. Visible areas first, concealed ones postponed. Postponement amplified the harm. Amplified harm led to bigger expenses. Regulatory adherence turned into a full-time ordeal. Authorizations for modifications, examinations, updated standards for wiring, pipes, sewers, accompanied by charges, filings, clearances, and experts, retained just to decipher paperwork. Tasks that Barber once handled straightforwardly, with teams constructing freely, now navigated thickets of red tape. Schedules dragged, expenses ballooned. Then arrived the minor irritations, overdue bills for long-past services, merchants gradually inflating charges, providers shortening terms, not from bankruptcy, but since high volumes caused occasional delays, triggering surcharges and usury. Fines for overlooked seals or deadlines, each trivial, yet adding up relentlessly. Employees caught glimpses no visitor ought to. Select furnishings subtly marked for potential auction, not due to flaws but for ready cash. Marble items shifted to warehouses, sterling catalogued, artwork evaluated. Nothing departed as yet, not formally. The mere readiness conveyed the message. In a pinch for funds, these could be liquidated. On the surface, operations hummed along, illumination vivid, warmth consistent, landscapes pristine. But the records revealed a different tale. Account books tinged with deficits, dossiers bulging with levy alerts, policy outlines, attorney letters, restoration quotes. Overhead had swelled to rival upkeep in weight. Barber possessed riches. Riches hold no boundless supply. The residence acted as if it demanded endless resources. The bureaucratic nicks persisted. Tiny gashes, non-stop seepage, demise via countless essentials, and no dressing proved sufficient to staunch it. No dressing could halt it. Thus, in time, the manor started to hollow out. Not through one dramatic act, nor with fanfare or an official goodbye. Subtly, incrementally, as conclusions unfold when all sense the shift, though none voices it. Workforce dwindled at first. Openings from departures or quits remained vacant. The landscaping team, formerly a dozen strong, dwindled to 6. Then 4. Indoor personnel merged duties, one individual handling twice the load, then thrice. Mechanisms still required care, but efficiencies could be carved. Chambers were sealed, heating elements deactivated to conserve fuel. Portions of the grounds maintained minimally. Visitor sections remained unlit. Ohio Columbus Barber passed away in 1920. He was 79. He had witnessed his match business thrive, his community advance, his medical center launch, and his envisioned estate consume assets quicker than any balance sheet could rationalize. Anna Dean Farm transferred to his successors, Anna herself followed by his offspring, complete with the choices he had postponed. How does one manage a palace that engulfs a legacy in upkeep yet fetches far below its outlay upon sale? How does one handle elegance once it turns onerous? Anna Dean Barber strove to sustain the illumination. The property carried her name. The homage and inheritance her spouse envisioned, yet she confronted identical calculations. Now absent his manufacturing powerhouse generating fresh capital, the holdings survived on its yields and the familial reserves at hand. The disparity between revenue and expenditures loomed enormous. The roaring 20s proved tough on grand estates across the board. Economic instability rocked the nation. Wages climbed higher. Public preferences evolved. Aspirations to emulate old-world nobility faded. Doubts arose about the ethics of lavish personal fortunes. Anodyne Farm seemed mismatched with the era. Not wicked, but outdated. A vestige of opulence dragged into a time of shifting values. Estate auctions kicked off around the mid-1920s, framed as dignified sales rather than desperate clear-outs. Treasured furnishings, artwork, ornaments, finely crafted luxuries, all transformed into funds for short-term needs like property taxes, coverage, or essential fixes. Shoppers arrived from Akron and Cleveland, savvy merchants spotting worth, enthusiasts chasing deals. Marble fireplaces got dismantled. Crystal fixtures descended from ceilings. The Steinway Grand in the music parlor, according to local tales, relocated elsewhere. Quietude crept in. Barren spaces accumulated. Chambers that formerly sparkled now rang hollow. The grand hall lay idle, far more than it bustled. The expansive banquet table, once accommodating 24, now served modest family meals at one side. Conservatories retained some heat, though with slimmer selections and fewer rarities. Stables housed fewer steeds. Agricultural efforts contracted to barely sustain the household. Sufficient for nourishing those on site, but far short of generating real income. The real teardown started toward the end of the 1920s and accelerated through the 1930s. Outlying buildings too burdensome to preserve came down. Never the central residence, at least initially, but the auxiliary ones. A glass house razed when shattered panes proved too expensive to mend. A storage shed leveled as its sagging beams outstripped any usefulness. The generating station probably scaled down or ceased operations altogether. The property linking to city power grids in its place. Every decision made sense at the time. Every step eroded the essence of Anodyne Farm. The Great Depression intensified the spiral. Potential funds simply evaporated. Markets for upscale goods dried up. Land appraisals plummeted. Levies held firm even as resources to cover them dwindled. Surviving edifices demanded ongoing upkeep they lacked. Moisture seeped through cracks. Ceilings crumbled. Mechanisms broke down. Gradual wear turned obvious. Deterioration shifted to instability, then outright danger. Come the late 1930s, Anodyne Farm as a functioning domain was done. The primary dwelling persisted in splendor, yet hollow and untenable. Certain areas might have seen sporadic use, many spaces sealed off, unlit and chill, amassing grime. Landscaped areas left untended reverted to weeds. A vision forged over years and vast fortunes shrank into a humbler, more poignant shadow. Forsaken property lacking direction or ready purchasers. The final gala had concluded. The melodies faded, visitors departed. Left behind masonry and echoes, plus the persistent riddle echoing from initial accounts to final ones. What fate awaits splendor unable to sustain itself? What endured? Masonry, echoes, and an unresolved query, though history offers resolutions in due course. The core building fell apart incrementally, not in a dramatic blast amid spectators, but via a prolonged erosion spanning years. During the 1940s, precarious elements yielded first. Caving ceilings, shifting facades, unreliable supports. The 1950s saw further losses. As preserving remnants grew unfeasible and interest in incomplete palaces lagged behind demand for reclaimed bits, block upon block, layer upon layer, anodyne farm unraveled, marble surrounds preserved for resale, intricate millwork extracted and redeployed, fittings consigned to bidding. A domain erected at great expense eroded to mere salvage and reminiscence. Into the 1960s, the living quarters vanished entirely. Its outline persisted. One could stroll the grounds and trace former boundaries, wall lines, terrace views, the sweeping foyer welcoming arrivals. Yet the edifice had merged back into the soil, debris and bases gradually overtaken by turf. Not all traces vanished. The entrance portals endure, those imposing wrought iron barriers now enclosing vacancy, yet defining legacy. An entryway to the past, a gateway declaring passage into a site of former significance. They've received care and safeguarding. Valued for artistry, certainly, and as symbols. They proclaim, this held weight, this transpired. Folks crafted something enduring here. The energy facility outlasted the manor. Its robust masonry, clear function, solid frame endured. For decades it loomed vacant, a testament to the underpinnings that enabled refinement, before gaining fresh purpose via adaptation. Narratives vary on exact dates, but it persisted due to sturdy design and visionaries who recognized its potential. Portions of the outbuildings persist. The shelters for the barber's fine equines were too solidly built to abandon. Later, stewards repurposed and preserved them. Sturdy constructions needn't perish when their original role concludes. Stroll through the area now and it's simple to picture the horses clip-clopping about, the workers bustling with their routines of mucking out stalls and brushing coats. The property endured, though transformed in ways unforeseen. Through the years it got divided up and put to new uses. Certain paths turned into residential neighborhoods. Others held on as farmland. Some parcels went to buyers or were gifted to caretakers equipped to nurture them. That vast 1,000-acre spread splintered into modest parcels, each carving out its separate story, yet all linked to the founding dream through their shared landscape and lingering recollections. Even as the grand structures faded away, the true keepers aren't chosen by scale, expense, or lofty ambitions. They're picked by basic criteria: solid construction, practical ongoing value, and the fondness of the local community. What lasted were the elements adaptable to fresh purposes, fulfilling current demands that folks actively chose to sustain. The vanished parts were overly niche, prohibitively expensive, or tied too tightly to a way of life that couldn't endure. The takeaways are stark and sobering. Safeguarding the past demands far more than noble aims. It requires financial viability. A lavish estate lacking funds turns into a nostalgic burden saddled with expenses, and those costs inevitably prevail. Prestige plays a role. Designating a place as a protected landmark can delay demolition. Foundations and endowments provide the resources that single people often lack. Most crucially, true conservation thrives on communal passion and regular engagement, not remote reverence, but things like educational visits, neighborhood gatherings, and daily roles that connect structures to the vitality of current residents, rather than relegating them to relics of bygone eras. Barberton's bond with Anodyne Farm evolved over time. A once proud emblem of a single tycoon's fortune morphed into collective heritage, evoking the community's own prosperous roots. The medical center he supported continued benefiting locals well beyond the demise of his home. Educational institutions he backed shaped wave after wave of students. The foundational projects he bankrolled fueled expansion. His civic contributions outlived the opulent manor by generations. In the present day, people can wander the grounds of the former estate. The entrance portals spark the mind's eye. The enduring structures provide a concrete link to yesteryear. Plaques nearby offer a concise summary. The deeper reality invites peering past the surface, into financial records and correspondence, into decisions taken or deferred, into the calculations that proved more enduring than elegance. The residence has disappeared. The ambition reached its close. The legacy persists, upheld by those committed to nurturing it. Sunlight would pierce the beams of a vacant ceiling if it were still there. As it is, rays illuminate turf, masonry, and portals leading to emptiness. An estate, bereft of earnings, becomes a reminiscence plagued by debts. Yet sentiments revive through modest efforts. The portals endure, that's a start. That's sufficient to carry on.